We might have to make a new layer before doing that. There we go. Yeah, so you have to make a new layer in order to drop these assets in. If you just hit import, it's gonna be fine. We have our timeline here at the bottom, sort of like After Effects, and then our properties and libraries over here on the right. By pressing F8 on the canvas, we're gonna convert this to a symbol. So I'm just gonna call this, card back, and it'll seem like nothing has changed, but if you go into our libraries panel now, we'll see that we have a card back symbol. Now if we select our symbol in our list here and then we double click up here in the little preview window, we enter that symbol, and it's kind of like entering our pre-comps now. If we want to go back to where we were, we have our little address bar up here. We can select scene 1 and we're back into our original canvas. And then we're going to go back into the symbol and dive into it here. So I'm going to hold Control and just drag out this end key until I get to 100. I need to right click it and then go to break apart. It's still pretty grouped up, so I'm going to break apart again. And now I can see that I'm starting to get access to these individual assets. So I'm just going to go in here and select everything. Just like that. And then I'm going to hit Control G, and that's going to group it. I want to animate this text separately, so I'm going to right click and go break apart. Okay. And now I think we have everything on its own group. I'm going to select everything now, right click, and then go down to Distribute to Layers. And what that's going to do is it's going to say, okay, I'm taking every one of your groups, I'm going to assign it to its own layer. So let's go to the pyramid base. So I want to move my time indicator to where I want the pyramid to land on the timeline. Halfway through this animation, I want the pyramid to be done animating. And I'm going to right click, and then I'm going to go up here to create motion tween. Whatever we do to this object is going to be recorded into this timeline now, and it's going to start setting keyframes. So if this is my last keyframe, I want this to actually be the same. But if you've noticed, our keyframe isn't activated yet. So to do this, I'm just going to go 1 up on my arrow key and then 1 down back to its original position. And just by moving that just a little bit, it's going to create this keyframe right here. So now I'm going to bring this back to the start keyframe, and I'm just going to shrink it down by using my transform tool, or my free transform tool. Make sure that your anchor point is set wherever you want it to scale from, and then I'm just going to bring it down. And if you hold shift, it's going to lock those transform properties. Let's scale it back up. Okay, there we go. Let's just repeat this whole process. So I'm selecting the eye, and I want to make sure that we right click our keyframe, go up to create motion tween, and then I'm going to budge it up a little bit in position to make that keyframe and put it down back to where it was. So now our end key is set. I'm going to take my indicator, scrub it all the way back to the first keyframe, and then I'm just going to scale this down holding my shift key. Do as well, just scale it back up. And then we have our motion tween. But if we want to offset these to make them a little bit more interesting, all you have to do is double click onto your keyframe, and then we can start moving these keys around, these down the timeline. And Y scale just out a little bit more. Our initial keyframe, and Yeah, just move it down and it'll duplicate itself. Alright, so now we have it properly offset on the animate in and the animate out. So now we want to animate the transparency. Yeah, so selecting the group itself in the canvas and going over to our properties panel, we'll see this tab called color effect. And on its style, we want to go down to alpha. And alpha is referring to the transparency. And we just want to crank it all the way down to start with. We're just going to click it once again. You kind of are clicking like this imaginary box right now, but Animate knows that it's there. And then we're just going to crank the alpha back up. Go to our text. Right click and go to Create Motion Tween. Budget up, budget down to create that keyframe. And then set a new in keyframe. We'll just bring it down here. Okay, text is a little bit different because this is still technically editable. Press F8 and just make this a symbol. We don't have to really worry about it because we're not going to dive into it later, so just press OK. And now you'll see that we have our color effect. Crank it down to 0. Move up to its end position, or roughly where it is. It doesn't really matter. So again, we're going to right click, go to Create Motion Tween, go to our end key, so maybe it comes in after this. Budget up, budget down to set that keyframe. Maybe even scale it just a little bit to set the scaling keyframes. Go back to our original key and then bring it all the way back down. And then while we're here, let's go ahead and set the alpha all the way to 0. Bring it, say, like right before its end key. Select it in the canvas. There we go. Then crank up the alpha. To grab our leaf component, we're going to, again, right click and go to our motion tween. Scrub over to where we want it to animate in, so maybe they kind of come in after everything. So maybe way out here. We'll go ahead and change the position, set that keyframe, and then bring it to where we want it to animate in. And I want it to come in about right here. Make sure that the start key is the same as the start key out here. And we're going to create a new layer above our leaf right here. And then we're just going to select the internal components of the card. So now this is our mask. So we're going to right click inside of the timeline and then just select mask. The pixel zone for our leaf now. So when it animates on, it just comes from the card. And exact same thing over here. Let's do it real quick. Making sure that our original key is also the same. Bring it in with the other one. I'm just using my arrow keys to move these around. Alright, so our position is right. Create a new layer above it. Grab our rectangle tool. Select our boundary zone. Right click, make it a mask. And then we're done. Okay. So I'm just going to break this apart by ungrouping it. Alright, ungrouping it. Actually, go into type and then go into create outlines. So I'm just selecting all of this right now. Control G. Alright, it's all one now. Okay. And then we can group all of this now, Control G, and then drop all of this into our CC Libraries portal. Alright. Okay, so before we go in here and edit this, we want to make sure it's a symbol, so we press F8, and we'll call this Sports Anthem. Hit OK. Now we'll go into our library, find our sport. It feels like they need motion or something. Select it in the canvas in order to select our whole duration. Right click and go to Create Motion Tween. Hop to wherever we want the end key to be. We'll change its position to lock that keyframe in, and then we'll go back to our original key and bring it all the way down. There we go. Comes up and then overshoots a little bit and then kind of bobs back down and then lands back in its final position. So always having that follow through animation is good, even if it's simple. So let's go to the Sports Anthem. We'll do our 3D rotation now. So if we select it and we go down to our duration, right click and do same thing, Motion Tween. But this time we're going to select this little 3D rotation tool. It's the 3D properties. But if you right click now in our duration, you can go up here and see that there's an option for 3D tween. We want to make sure that that's ticked on. So let's go to wherever this is. Say I want it to animate in a little bit before the foam finger comes up. Maybe like right there. So I'm just going to rotate this just a little bit. But I might do it in increments of 180 degrees just so you're making sure that you're getting the correct amount of rotations, because you can kind of lose it since we're kind of in this orthographic view. There we go. Go to our properties. Color style, alpha, crank it down to nothing. Bring the timeline out just a little bit. Maybe up to like where the foam... Actually, no, that'll be too long. Let's just bring it out a little bit in the timeline. Select it again. Crank up our alpha. And there we go. Alright, not too bad. That one's... We'll make a new layer above it. We're going to create our mask. Here we go. And then right click our mask and then select mask. And there we go. So just to go over everything, we kind of combined these two here. Not all of these have to be like crazy and you know, packed with all of this motion. As a matter of fact, it might help if a couple of them are simple, just to kind of break it up a little bit. And then of course we went over our 3D tweening, our masking, and then grouping techniques within Illustrator.